This is not a video about how you should play D&D. It's a video about how you could, if you wanted, make the game something more memorable, cohesive, and unique. When we don't have anyone to play with immediately, there's a tendency to over-design our worlds and characters. For some folks, that's the primary way they enjoy the game. I know that I have a folder of 200 characters that I'm never going to use. That's valid, and I'm not saying that you should stop. However, if this is a character or a game world that you actually want to use in the game, you could be smothering the one thing that makes tabletop role-playing a unique method of storytelling: negative space. Let me give you a story from my own experience, and maybe it will feel familiar, maybe it won't. You finally got a group together. You're all meeting up in 2 weeks. You can't wait, so you sit down with your character sheet and get everything ready. It's not enough to say that you're human, a sorcerer, and neutral good. What are the optimal skill proficiencies for every single situation your sorcerer might find themselves in? What spells should you choose? How should you spend every single copper piece to make sure that you have all the right gear? What background will give you the maximum number of resources to solve the narrative problem of your character? What kind of backstory would justify these decisions? What kind of backstory will make everyone else pay attention to you? What's your plan for the next 3 levels? The next 7? What feats can optimally represent your character's stunning potential? And before you know it, you've spent an hour trying to solve a game that you haven't played yet. And I don't know about you, but I've been disappointed by the lack of overlap between my character build and the campaign every time I've tried to do that. Having a grand vision for the future of my character, a solution for their place in the narrative or the game mechanics, nearly always leads to tension and disappointment. And the same thing has happened when I've tried to overmake a game world. Before even meeting up for session 0, I've built crazy, detailed worlds and societies and scenarios that end up being totally incompatible with the player characters. It's like finding out that you're going to cook a stew and you try to bring every ingredient yourself. This is a common pitfall for neurodivergent folks, especially in ADHD and autism, because we often spend our time rehearsing for social interactions, hoping the responses and routines that we've prepped come up so that we can successfully navigate the dungeon of conversing with neurotypicals. Past a certain point, and I'll talk about where that point is shortly, the sole function of prep, whether you're prepping a character or a game, is to reduce fear. But anything in the game worth happening happens in the game, at the table. Otherwise, we'd all just meet up once a week and trade handwritten novels. Design work that you do alone in any field is typically going to fall short of design work that you do in a diverse group, because you're trying to solve a complex problem. The more of the game you try to solve on your own, the less relevant and applicable your solution becomes. It might even become flat out incompatible. Just look at the earliest editions of Dungeons & Dragons. They're design nightmares. They try to account for weird fringe scenarios while they leave out problems that would have been obvious if they had just been brought up in a diverse group setting. To me, the best thing about D&D is that we do things together that none of us could do on our own, or even would have thought to do alone. Trying to solve every imaginary scenario before the game even starts is antithesis to that, and it might generate a small dopamine rush, but once that fades, you'll be left with something rigid and unusable. I use feats as a major example of this, and for that reason, I don't include them in about a third of the games I run. I know, hear me out. When you select a feat, you're solving for a specific kind of scenario. I'm never going to get lost. I will never be surprised again. I'm never going to forget anything. I will never run out of options. It's a pretty major change to your character, and it happens while you're alone looking at a menu. It has the same shared narrative value as a 20-page backstory or world-building document, which is to say, it has none. I believe it could be the Dungeon Master's job to facilitate those changes at the table, even in one-on-one play. I want you to decide which of these is more compelling. I leveled up and chose the alert feat. Now I can't be surprised. Or, while you were all resting, the druid helped me seek out the spirit of the deep woods, and I faced a trial to gain a primal boon. I gained the senses of the hunter, that I might never be prey again. In both instances, that player has gotten some boost to their powers of observation. The second one happened in a Curse of Strahd campaign that I was running, and I was not using feats. The player in question had scheduled a side quest with me and another player pursuing a rumor of a spirit that would grant bestial powers. At the end of a grueling trial, I seeded those rumors after they told me their character was going to look for something like a sentinel shield, because once they got pretty messed up in a surprise attack. I wanted them to gain that advantage, so I created that scenario. They wanted to seek out that advantage, so they solved that scenario. They did it at the table, and they had a story to tell. Their character's body had changed forever. The actual boon was something like advantage on perception checks to detect hidden foes, and some claws, like a permanent alter self. But it accomplished their goal of gaining an edge over sneaky foes. If they could have just grabbed the alert feat at level 4, that wouldn't have been possible. They wouldn't have chosen to engage with the world to grow their character. I wouldn't have chosen to engage with their character to grow my world in that way. So with all that said, how much do you actually need to know about your character in order to play the game, or your world? Well, for minimalist world building, I can only direct you to people who do it way better than I do, and that's Kelsey Dionne and Sly Flourish. Kelsey Dionne runs the Arcane Library, an adventure publisher that has put out some of the easiest to run, coolest adventures that I've ever seen in all my years of playing D&D. And Sly Flourish, who you've probably already heard of, is the author of the Lazy Dungeon Master series. His prepping live streams are really good. Watching his week-to-week game prep and how much he's willing to throw out, how easy it is for him to pop something else in its place is cathartic. For minimal character building, here's what I suggest. Get your class, your race, your ability scores, your skill proficiencies, and a standard equipment kit. If you want, pick some bonds, flaws, ideals, and personality traits, but you don't even have to do that. It's okay if you don't know your character's alignment or backstory. If you don't have the exact layout of their backpack visualized, that's fine. The more stuff you fill in as a response to your fellow players and Dungeon Master, the more coherent narrative value, which in D&D we call having fun, will appear as a result. The uniqueness that you want your character to have will be a natural consequence of playing the game. Thank you for watching. Thank you to my patrons. And until next time.